They tried to deport me this morning. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being dramatic. This actually happened to be confusing, humiliating. Surreal second of it. Immigration agents stopped me on the street, questioned me, arrested me, put me in a van, took me to a detention center, and started processing me for deportation. All because they thought I was someone else. And for several hours, I felt what millions of people feel every single day: fear, confusion, helplessness, and the brutal absurdity of a system that moves faster than common sense. If this sounds unbelievable, comment unbelievable below, because even I'm still shaking. This isn't a political story. This isn't a debate. This is simply what happened to me today, step by step, and why it changed the way I see everything. I had been working all night, literally. The entire night, handling a crisis at the company. Zero sleep. 24 hours straight, running on caffeine and adrenaline. By sunrise, the situation was fixed, and I was done. Exhausted, drained. Running on fumes, I left the office around 6 a.m. in casual clothes, hoodie, jeans, a cap. Nothing special. Just a tired guy walking to his car after a long night, and that's when they appeared. 2 agents. Fast, direct, serious. They asked me to stop. They asked where I was from. They asked for ID. At first I thought it was a mistake. Then I thought it was a misunderstanding. Then I realized they weren't listening. I tried to explain. I showed them my ID. I told them who I was. But they looked at me with suspicion, like every word coming out of my mouth was a lie. And before I could process what was happening, they put me in handcuffs. Cold metal. Behind my back, on a public street, people stared. Some filmed. Some whispered. And in that moment, no one knew who I was. No one cared who I was. I wasn't a CEO or a founder or a person with influence. I was just a tired, unshaven human being who looked like someone on their paperwork. And that was enough. They put me in a van with others silent, scared, confused faces. In those cramped seats with my hands locked behind me, I realized something. In the eyes of a system built on speed instead of accuracy, we were all the same. No names. No backstories. Just bodies being processed. They took my phone, my wallet, my keys, everything. I couldn't call anyone. Couldn't explain anything. I just sat there, hoping someone, somewhere, would realize the truth. Then came the detention facility. Fluorescent lights. Concrete walls. Clipboards. Gloves. Voices calling names that weren't ours. They photographed us. Fingerprinted us. Questioned us. Entered data into computers. None of it felt human. All of it felt mechanical, like the goal wasn't to understand us, but to move us. Ours passed with no clock, no phone, no updates, just waiting. Waiting and thinking. Thinking about how quickly a life can be reduced to paperwork and misidentification, and then, finally, something changed. A group of officers rushed in. They called my name, more the name they thought was mine. They pulled me out, brought me into an office. Suddenly, everyone looked uncomfortable. Someone had run my fingerprints correctly. Someone had double-checked the data. Someone finally realized I wasn't who they thought I was. And just like that, the tone shifted from suspicion to apology. A mistake. A mix-up. A simple case of wrong person. But nothing about what I felt was simple, because for several hours today, I experienced something that millions experience without recognition, without cameras, without anyone rushing to fix it, a system so big it stopped seeing people at all. And I needed to tell you this, not for shock value, not for sympathy, but because it changed me, because it could happen to anyone, because it shows something deeply broken, because it reminded me how fragile identity becomes when the system stops listening. They knew I was exactly who I said I was. They realized it was a massive mistake, and suddenly, the apologies came flooding in. They explained. They made excuses. It was a mix-up, a resemblance, human error, a failure of the system. All of it boiled down to one fact. They had arrested the wrong person, a U.S. citizen, someone who posed no threat. And they had put me through hours of humiliation and fear because they didn't do their jobs properly, because they acted first and thought later. They returned my belongings, my phone, my wallet, my keys. They offered to drive me wherever I wanted. They promised explanations, investigations, accountability. But how do you give someone back the hours spent in detention? The fear? The humiliation? How do you undo the realization of how powerless you are? I asked them, what would have happened if I wasn't me? If I wasn't recognized? If I was just a regular person with no platform, no lawyers, no ability to prove myself? They had no good answer. None. And that's the terrifying truth. For millions of people, there is no recognition. No one comes to apologize. No one sorts the mistake. They just get processed, and often forgotten. This experience taught me something viscerally in my body, not just my mind. Power is fragile. Even with influence and resources, I was helpless in handcuffs in a van, at the mercy of a system that didn't see me. And if I felt that powerless, what about those with less? Those without connections, without voice, without hope of being believed? Recognition matters. That was the problem. They didn't see me, not the real me, just the tired, underdressed, unshaven version of me. And that failure of recognition caused hours of fear and uncertainty. But many people never get recognized. They remain invisible, always processed as just another case, another number, another mistake that won't be corrected. I learned how broken the system is, how mechanical, how dehumanizing, how it strips away dignity, crushes spirits, reduces people to forms, fingerprints, data points. Imagine living with that fear every day. Imagine never feeling safe, never secure, always knowing that your life could be disrupted, your freedom taken, your family separated. That is the reality for millions. I share this not because it happened to me, but because it happens. It's real. It's unbelievable, yet completely true. It reveals a system that treats humans like objects, that punishes the powerless, and that ignores accountability. I share this because I want you to imagine it was you. Imagine being stopped for no reason, arrested, handcuffed, driven to a facility, held for hours, processed like cargo, treated like less than human, and then realize this happens every single day? Is that acceptable? Is that the system we want? I don't know what happens next. They promised investigation, accountability, change, but I've seen words like that before. I hope it's different this time, but I am not naive. This story needs to be told. It needs to be shared, because millions of people cannot tell their story. They cannot make the world listen. Be their voice. Share their reality. Demand change. This is real. This is unacceptable. And it must matter. They tried to deport me this morning. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not joking. This actually happened. 2 agents stopped me on the street, asked for my ID, asked where I was from, and before I knew it, I was in handcuffs. On a public street, being arrested, I tried to explain. I told them who I was. I showed them my ID. I said there's been a mistake. They didn't listen. They didn't recognize me. And for hours, I felt what millions feel every day: fear, confusion, helplessness. I was thrown into a van with others, silent, scared, unsure of what would happen. My phone, my wallet, my keys all taken. No way to call anyone. No way to prove who I was. Just processed by a system that didn't care. At the detention facility, they photographed us, fingerprinted us, asked questions, filled out forms, mechanical, impersonal, dehumanizing, for hours. I sat there, exhausted, terrified, humiliated, realizing that in the eyes of bureaucracy, I was invisible. Finally, after what felt like forever, someone realized the mistake. They ran my fingerprints, checked again, and the truth came out. I was not who they thought I was. The apologies came. They returned my belongings. They offered to explain, to make it right. But nothing can give back the hours I spent in handcuffs. Nothing can undo the fear or the humiliation. And then I asked the question that shook them. What if I wasn't me? What if I didn't have resources, connections, a platform? What would have happened then? They didn't have an answer. That's the truth. This system doesn't care who you are. Recognition matters. Power matters. Without it, you are just another case, another number, another human being processed and forgotten. I'm sharing this not for shock, not for politics, but because this is real, because it happens every single day to people who don't have anyone to tell their story. Imagine being powerless like that. Imagine being invisible. Imagine living with that fear constantly. This is unacceptable. It's dehumanizing. It must change. Be aware. Share this. Make people care. Be a voice for those who have none.